My husband promised me that he would only accompany her during her depression episodes 99 times. Every time he goes to accompany her during her depression episodes, he would buy me a golden bean. After collecting 99 golden beans, my husband noticed I had changed. I no longer cried and tried to stop him from seeing other women. Instead, I just asked him for a peace lock as a gift for our soon-to-be-born child when I mentioned the child. My husband's expression softened slightly. When I get back, we will go to the hospital together for the prenatal checkup. I obediently responded with a soft hum, but I didn't tell him that 10 days ago I had already submitted the divorce papers, and now we are officially divorced. Chapter 1. On the 10th day after submitting the divorce papers, I ran into Robert in the hospital corridor. He was carefully supporting Orianna as though protecting a precious treasure. But as soon as he saw me, Robert frowned immediately. "What are you here for? Are you here to cause trouble for Ori again?" He eyed me wearily, his gaze cold enough to freeze my heart. Orianna held Robert's hand, looking at me apologetically. "Celine, please don't misunderstand. Robert just cares too much about me." Then her gaze shifted to my belly. "I heard you were hospitalized, too. Is your baby all right?" Before I could answer, Robert hurriedly reassured her. "It's probably just a bit of a scare. Nothing serious. Don't overthink it. Just focus on taking care of yourself." I instinctively touched my stomach, a bitter feeling rising inside. Yes. What could be wrong? Isn't it just that I lost the baby? How could it compare to Orianna's importance? Otherwise, why would Robert, knowing full well that I was in the same hospital, not even bother to check on me? If only he had come to visit, he would have known. Our child is no longer with us. I forced a smile, my fingers brushing against the warm glass bottle in my pocket. Since Orianna's return, Robert had been disappearing every few days to accompany her. He said, "Ori has been sensitive since childhood, and now she's sick. What if something happens when I'm not with her?" "Don't worry, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just don't want her to do something foolish." He promised me he would only accompany Orianna 99 times. After 99 times, he would settle down and live a good life with me. So every time he left, I would put one golden bean in the glass bottle. 7 days ago, I finally collected all 99, but when I eagerly found him, what I saw was Robert holding Orianna tightly in his arms. I am his wife, and at this moment, I could only stand by the street, gazing at his happiness with another woman from a distance. "What are you doing?" I asked with reddened eyes. Walking up to them in a daze, Robert hastily released his hold on Orianna, his eyes full of panic. "Celine, don't misunderstand. It's not what you think." Before I could speak, Orianna interjected, "It's all my fault. I'm the one who disturbed you too. I'm sorry. Robert, just leave me alone from now on. Let me die out here." With that, she rushed towards the street, just in time to be knocked down by a bicycle. Robert's face changed instantly, and he pushed me aside to scoop Orianna into his arms. I didn't have time to react before I fell hard to the ground. A sharp pain shot through my abdomen, and trembling, I touched it. My fingers came away, stained with bright red blood. "My child, my child, my child. Honey, Robert." I called his name through gritted teeth, hoping he would turn back. Robert paused, then looked at me with a hateful glare. "Celine, you know Ori has depression. Why would you provoke her? If anything happens to Ori, I'll never forgive you. This is your lesson. Stay away from Ori from now on." He then picked Orianna up and rushed her into the car. In the end, a kind-hearted passerby saw what happened and rushed me to the hospital. The doctor told me I had miscarried. Chapter 2. Lying on the hospital bed. My mind replayed the moment Robert left, and tears blurred my vision. "Robert, I promised you, from now on, I will never approach you or her again. You are free. The memory stops here." Robert, as if not noticing the paleness on my face, lightly reminded me, "If there's nothing else, you can go home now. After all, you're an adult. Be mindful not to waste medical resources." I nodded. "Okay." Robert continued, "I'll be with Ori for the next few days. Don't come looking for me unless it's urgent." I nodded again. "Okay." Perhaps my response was too calm, and Robert seemed taken aback. He let go of Orianna and took a few steps closer. "Are you feeling okay? Once Ori's emotions stabilize, I'll go with you for a proper checkup." I hummed in response, pretending not to see Orianna's resentful gaze. As we brushed past each other, I caught a whiff of Robert's scent. Chanel No. 5. It was Orianna's favorite perfume. During these days in the hospital, Robert must have spent a lot of time holding Orianna in his arms. Otherwise, how could his clothes still carry that scent? When I got home, the maid, Ollie, was about to leave, seeing my pale face. She was startled. Madam, why does your face look so pale? Is something wrong? I smiled faintly, but my eyes couldn't stop from reddening. So this is how bad I look. So others can tell that something's wrong with me. But why couldn't Robert notice? It's been 7 days, and not even a single word of concern would have been enough. Seeing that I didn't reply, Ollie stopped asking. She gently helped me sit down. That evening, Ollie brought me a large bowl of chicken soup. Madam, your body has always been weak. And now you're pregnant. You should drink this to nourish yourself. Ollie was from another province, working alone in City A. The chicken was sent by her children from the countryside a few days ago, and Ollie had been reluctant to eat it. I thanked Ollie and sat at the dining table, lost in thought for a long time. I couldn't understand why is it that even outsiders care so much about me, but my husband can abandon me again and again. This marriage, it really seems kind of laughable. Sighing, I carefully brought the soup to my lips, just as I was about to drink. The door to the villa opened. Celine, I'm back. Robert walked in, holding a few changes of women's clothes. I was stunned for a moment and asked, why are you back? Don't you need to be with Orianna? Robert put the clothes down and casually said, the doctor said Ori's condition isn't severe, but I'm still not at ease, so I've had her stay a few more days in the hospital. I'm just back to get some daily necessities. I hummed in response, but my mind couldn't help but recall what he said this morning. If there's nothing else, you can go home now. Be mindful and don't waste medical resources. So as long as it's Orianna, everything changes. Maybe I really am numb inside. I don't even have the energy to argue anymore. Lowering my eyes, I was about to drink the soup again when Robert, now holding the items, suddenly spoke. Ollie made chicken soup. Actually, you can wait a bit. Ori is weak, and chicken soup is the best for her right now. My hand holding the soup bowl froze, and I stared at him in a daze. This is the soup Ollie made for me, because I'm pregnant. Robert pretended not to hear and went about taking out some food containers from the cupboard. So what if you're pregnant? I know your body well. Whether you drink the soup or not doesn't matter. Let Ori have it this time. Next time, I'll take you to a private restaurant for a meal. His familiar words made me remember the past. Celine, I gave the necklace from this auction to Ori. I'll buy you one next time. Celine, Ori doesn't have anyone to be with, so I won't be home for the new year. I'll spend time with you next time. Celine, don't come to Lucas's engagement banquet. Ori wants to meet my friends. I'll bring you next time, Celine. So many next times. Too many for me to count. Chapter 3. While I was lost in thought, Robert packed the chicken soup into a lunchbox and half-heartedly said, I'm leaving now. Take good care of yourself at home. He turned to leave, but the hem of his coat accidentally brushed against the soup bowl on the table. Bang! The bowl fell to the floor, shattering along with my heart. Robert! I called out to him, pulling the glass bottle containing the 99 golden beans from my pocket. 99 golden beans. Count them. Robert paused, turned around, and looked at me in surprise. Is this enough? I nodded. Yes. Robert sat down the things in his hands, looking somewhat troubled. I said nothing, only waiting for an answer as I expected. Robert hesitated for a moment before saying, Celine, Ori can't be left alone right now. A flicker of guilt passed through his eyes, but he continued. Our agreement. Forget it. I lowered my eyes and sighed softly. Okay, Robert froze, unable to believe that I had agreed so easily. He hugged me excitedly. Celine, you're so good. Don't worry. Once Ori's condition stabilizes, I'll spend time with you properly. I hummed softly, then made a simple request. The baby is about to be born. I want a peace lock. When I mentioned the baby, Robert's expression softened further. Okay, when I come back, I'll go with you for the checkup and buy the best. Most beautiful peace lock for our baby. My pupils trembled slightly, and the pain of losing the child washed over me again. Okay, but my child would never see the world. After he left, I stood up and opened the drawer. pulling out the stack of medical records I had carefully organized. The first pregnancy confirmation, the first checkup, the first prescription for miscarriage prevention. Every night when Robert wasn't home, I would take them out and look at them again and again. They represented the excitement and hope of becoming a mother for the first time, and my expectations for a happy family as a wife. But now everything was gone. I took out the miscarriage report from my pocket, trembling as I placed it with the other papers. Tears fell, soaking the papers, as if bidding them farewell, taking a deep breath. I was about to close the drawer when suddenly I heard Robert's voice from behind. "What are you doing?" I hurriedly closed the drawer, wiping the tears from the corners of my eyes. Robert walked over, and his gaze fixed on the drawer. "Why are you back?" I stiffened, leaning against the cabinet, and awkwardly changed the subject. Robert came closer and raised his hand, but instead of touching me, his hand landed on the corner of my eye. "You've been crying?" He stared at the dampness on his hand, a bit helpless. I smiled weakly and casually explained, "Pregnant women, you know, their emotions can be all over the place. I'll be fine in a bit." Robert sighed in relief. "That's good. I forgot to ask earlier, what kind of peace lock do you want? How about a cloud design with the character for Fu? Good fortune. Simple and elegant." I was a little stunned, not expecting him to care so much. If only he had cared like this before. "Sure, you decide." Robert nodded, confirming my choice before heading out. But just before he closed the door, he stopped again to check. "Are you sure you're okay?" I opened my mouth, suddenly feeling a flicker of hope rise within me. "If something happens to me, would you stay and be with me?" Robert paused for a moment, then smiled again. "Celine, stop being so ridiculous. Ori is still in the hospital waiting for me. Go to bed early. I'll leave now." After he closed the door, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I cried for being blind enough to marry Robert, and I cried for foolishly hoping for him again and again. I knew the outcome all along, didn't I? That night, I packed all my belongings. The divorce cooling-off period hadn't ended yet, but I was already utterly exhausted. Chapter 4. The next day, I went to the jewelry store with the 99 golden beans. I had a small bracelet made. I placed it in the box I had prepared the night before. Inside were all the things I had gathered for the baby over the past 2 months. I wanted to bury them underground along with the peace lock. To accompany the child I never had the chance to meet, to tell them that their parents' love was never absent. After receiving Robert's message, I went to the hospital. When I walked into Orianna's room, Robert was not there. He was probably out getting food. Orianna smiled and asked, "Celine, are you looking for Robert? Is there something you need?" I forced a smile, my tone calm. "I came to get the peace lock." "Do you know where Robert put it?" Orianna made a dramatic sound and pulled back the blanket, revealing her foot. On her ankle was a red string, with a delicate peace lock hanging from it. Clouds, the character for Fu, good fortune, just like the one Robert had promised me. "Is this what you mean?" Robert gave it to me as an anklet. "Does it look nice?" A simple sentence was like a heavy hammer striking my heart. I stared blankly at the red string, unable to say a single word of questioning. I had lost my child, and my husband didn't love me. I only wanted a peace lock. I only wanted for that unborn child to be buried underground with their father's blessing. That's all. I didn't know how I left the hospital. All I knew was when I got home, my throat was completely hoarse from crying, and I could no longer make a sound. At home, I left a letter for Robert after confirming there was nothing missing. I picked up my luggage and the cardboard box and left the villa. I didn't want my child to have anything to do with Robert anymore. The security guard, just back from his shift, enthusiastically offered to help carry my luggage, but I refused. From now on, I wanted to walk this path alone. Meanwhile, Robert, who had just returned from getting food, placed the lunchbox down. "Ori, while I was gone, did Celine come by?" Orianna smiled and pulled her feet back under the blanket. "No, no one came by." Robert nodded and opened the lunchbox. "Let's eat first. Did you keep the peace lock I gave you for me? This afternoon, I'll go home and bring it to Celine." Orianna hummed an acknowledgement and took the lunchbox. Just then, someone knocked on the door. A nurse entered and asked, "Is anyone here a relative of Celine?" She forgot to pick up her miscarriage medication. Bang! The lunchbox dropped to the floor, making a sharp noise. The food spilled everywhere, but no one cared. Robert suddenly stood up, disbelief in his voice. What? What did you just say? The nurse, startled, looked at him curiously. Are you a relative of Mrs. Celine? She was hospitalized for a miscarriage a few days ago, and she forgot her medication. I saw her leave this room just now, so I came to ask, who is her relative? Robert opened his mouth, his face turning pale. I'm her husband. Upon hearing this, the nurse's previously friendly demeanor immediately shifted. She looked Robert up and down, her gaze filled with scorn. You're that irresponsible husband of Mrs. Celine. Your wife has been hospitalized for a miscarriage all this time, and you didn't visit once. That's impressive. Robert's pupils trembled, and he stammered. I didn't know she had a miscarriage. The nurse scoffed. She's been in the hospital for so long. And as her husband, you don't care at all. As she spoke, her eyes swept over the personal items in the room. It looks like you've been staying in the hospital for a few days, too. Didn't you think to ask about your wife? Where she is, what she's doing? Chapter 5. As the nurse's sarcastic remarks continued, Robert's face grew paler and paler. He remembered the day he ran into me at the hospital. My pale face. He recalled the night he came home, the chicken soup in front of me, and I said this soup was specially made for me by Ollie. It turned out that the bowl of soup was because of me. Robert suddenly punched the wall, regret and guilt almost choking him. The nurse frowned and said coldly, This is a hospital. Watch your manners. What's your attitude? Orianna couldn't help but lash out at the nurse. She had only just learned that I had miscarried. Seeing Robert in such a state of despair, she panicked. The nurse scoffed, What's wrong with me? You're the one being irresponsible. And now you don't want people to say anything? You, as his sister, don't care about your sister-in-law either? Orianna froze, instinctively responding, Sister-in-law, I'm Robert's. His what? The nurse looked at her suspense. Orianna bit her lip, glancing shyly at Lu Yuanzhou. I'm Robert's childhood friend. Bang! The nurse slammed the tray down heavily, sneering. So it's a couple of lovers. No wonder he doesn't care about his wife's miscarriage. Ugh, you two look all prim and proper, but it turns out you're just a scumbag and a mistress. Ugh, Orianna sat up in bed, trembling, and pointed a finger at the nurse. You, what did you say? Say it again. The nurse, hands on her hips, no longer concerned with medical ethics, sneered at her. Scumbag. Slut. Since Orianna had developed depression, people had always treated her carefully, and she had never been humiliated like this before. Now, provoked by the nurse, she suddenly lost control and grabbed the nearest book, throwing it at the nurse. Stop, Robert. Just recovering, saw the scene and immediately shouted, but it was already too late. The corner of the book brushed against the nurse's eye, leaving a long bloodstain. Ah! The nurse screamed as she touched the blood on her face and quickly ran out of the room. Someone help. There's a disturbance. Several doctors and nurses rushed in, and upon seeing the bloodstain on the nurse's face, they gasped. The wound wasn't severe, but it had scraped her eye area. Had it been any further, it could have damaged her eye. Anna, what happened? The head nurse carefully cleaned her wound with some disinfectant cotton, her face full of concern. Anna was a new hire this year, only in her 20s, unmarried. Now her face was injured, and if a scar remained, it could affect her future prospects. Anna knew this too, and upon seeing the head nurse's concerned expression, she hurriedly blinked back tears, saying, Head nurse. She threw things at me. She pointed at Orianna with a face full of grievance. The head nurse's face darkened. This patient. Are you not going to explain yourself? This is a hospital. If you injure someone for no reason, you must take responsibility. At this moment, Orianna calmed down a little, hearing the head nurse's words. She looked panicked, instinctively glancing at Robert, hoping he would speak up for her, receiving her look. Robert, as always, wanted to defend her. Ori didn't mean it. She has depression just because she didn't mean it. Is it okay to injure someone just because she has depression? Does that mean hurting others is fine? The head nurse interrupted him directly. Regardless of the reason, you've injured someone, and you must give Anna an explanation. Robert froze, and reason told him the head nurse was right. I'm sorry. We will compensate. Seeing that his attitude was reasonable, the head nurse's expression softened. Anna, what do you think? Anna glared at Orianna, gritting her teeth as she said, "I want compensation and an apology from her." Robert nodded, not thinking the request was unreasonable. Chapter 6. I will never apologize to her. Orianna tightly clenched the blanket, her eyes filled with malice. "Why should I apologize? I didn't do anything wrong." She then turned to Robert, looking pitiful as she said, "Robert, I don't want to apologize." Robert frowned, the first time he felt that Orianna was being unreasonable. "Ori, listen to me. Apologize to her." Orianna's eyes turned red, tears falling down her face. "Robert, you've changed. You weren't like this before." Robert furrowed his brows even more tightly. How was he different before? Seeing that he didn't speak, Orianna gritted her teeth and used the same trick again. "Fine. I understand. Since you all want me dead, I'll just die for you to see." With that, she jumped out of bed and ran toward the window. Robert's pupils shrank, and he rushed forward to stop her. "Ori, calm down. All right, you don't have to apologize. No one is forcing you." While he was comforting Orianna, the head nurse sneered, having worked in the hospital for 7 or 8 years. She had seen all kinds of people. She immediately saw through Orianna's theatrics. "This patient," the nurse said, "you need to provide evidence for your words. When did anyone say we wanted you dead? Don't think that you can just throw out accusations and make things go away. This is a hospital, not a place for tantrums. If you keep acting like this, don't blame us for calling the police." Orianna's expression twisted for a moment, as if the paint on her face had cracked. The others also calmed down, looking at her with mocking eyes. Robert didn't notice this, and his expression darkened. "What do you mean? Aren't you supposed to be medical professionals? How can you not even have basic sympathy?" The head nurse rolled her eyes. "What's wrong with being a medical professional? We're people, too, and we deserve respect. Should we show sympathy just because she hit someone? Enough with the nonsense. Apologize now. This is not a place for your tantrums." Others also chimed in. "Yeah, hurry up and apologize. If you don't, we'll call the police. Seriously, what kind of people are they?" Unable to bear the accusations, Orianna angrily rushed up to the head nurse. "You, what's that thing on your ankle?" Robert suddenly spoke, his gaze fixed on the red string around Orianna's ankle. Orianna immediately crouched down, trying to cover the red string. It's nothing." Robert's face darkened, his eyes sharp. "Where's the peace lock I asked you to keep? Bring it out." Orianna nervously lowered her gaze, not daring to meet his eyes. "Robert, it's just a peace lock. I'll say this one last time, bring it out." Robert's gaze was intense. As if a storm was brewing in his eyes, Orianna finally panicked. She stood up and took a few steps back, exposing the peace lock on her ankle, the cloud pattern, the character of Fortune, and it was identical to the one Robert had bought. Robert suddenly stepped forward and yanked the peace lock off Orianna's ankle, his fingers digging into his palm. "Nurse, you just said Celine came here?" Anna furrowed her brow. "Which Celine?" "Celine. Yes, she came. I saw her coming out of the ward in the hallway, and that's when I remembered to look for you." Orianna shot her a glare, then sweetly tried to grab Robert's hand. "Robert, I just fell asleep. I didn't know Celine was here." Robert didn't respond, still dazed, staring at the peace lock in his hand. "Nurse, I want to ask, how did my wife miscarry?" Anna glanced at the head nurse, and seeing no objection, she replied, "Celine, she was hit. That's why she lost the baby. I've never seen a husband like you. Your wife's been in the hospital for so long, and not only did you not care, but a stranger had to bring her here. When did this happen?" Robert looked up, his eyes bloodshot, almost consumed with rage. Chapter 7. What? Anna was startled. At this moment, Robert seemed even more terrifying than when Orianna was throwing a tantrum earlier. Robert yanked Orianna's hand away. "When did Celine come to the hospital?" His voice was soft, but it seemed as if he was on the edge of collapse. 11 days ago." Robert opened his mouth, trying with all his might, but no words came out. He remembered. 11 days ago, that was when I went to find him. Orianna had lost control and rushed into the street, only to be hit by a bicycle. In a moment of desperation, it was he who pushed me out of the way. He remembered that day I was lying on the ground, crying and calling his name, saying my stomach hurt. What did he say? Celine, you know Ori has depression. Why do you keep provoking her? If something happens to Ori, I will never forgive you. This time, consider it a lesson for you. Stay away from Ori in the future. That lesson, it hurts so much. Robert staggered a few steps. As if being overwhelmed by a flood of pain, my child was lost because of me. His gaze fell on the peace lock, and suddenly he realized something. He rushed out of the room in a frenzy. Home. Celine. At that moment, he couldn't think of Orianna anymore. His mind and heart were solely focused on returning to my side to apologize, to atone for what he had done. Orianna's heart skipped a beat. As if something had slipped out of her control, she hurriedly tried to chase after Robert, but was stopped by the head nurse. You can't leave. Orianna's face immediately turned sour as she was blocked. Why can't I leave? This is a hospital. Are you going to accuse me of illegal detention now? The head nurse smirked. You're really good at throwing around accusations. You hurt someone, and now you think you can leave without apologizing or compensating. Let me be clear. I've already called the police. Just wait here. When Orianna heard the mention of the police, panic flashed in her eyes, and she quickly shouted, Robert, Robert. What a familiar scene. 11 days ago, Robert had abandoned me for Orianna. Now, once again, he ignored Orianna's desperate pleas because of me. But sadly, none of this concerned me anymore. On the other side, Robert had returned home. Celine. I know I was wrong. Celine, I'm sorry. I bought the peace lock you wanted. Celine. But no matter how loudly Robert called, no one responded. Fear instantly overwhelmed him. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. There was no one. Still no one. Then it hit him. Robert rushed to open the wardrobe. Half the clothes were gone. Everything of mine was gone, except for one picture frame. It was the photo we took when Robert proposed to me. That summer, I had told Robert, if one day you propose to me, make sure to set off fireworks. Our love should be as bright as fireworks. Later, Robert set off fireworks all over the city for me. We made a wish beneath the fireworks, cherishing each other, hoping to grow old together, but we both forgot. Fireworks are always fleeting after the brief brilliance. Nothing remains. Robert also remembered that day. I covered my mouth, tears in my eyes, in front of our family and friends. I placed my hand in his. I said, Robert, I'm willing to marry you. The lively scene felt like it was just yesterday, but now I was no longer in the house. Without realizing it, Robert wandered into the kitchen, which was as neat and tidy as always. He turned around and accidentally kicked a glass bottle on the floor. He frowned, then bent down to pick it up. It was the bottle I used to store gold beans. The first time Orianna had a breakdown was in the middle of the night. I couldn't bear to leave her alone. Robert was in a hurry, so he grabbed a random glass bottle from the kitchen and handed it to me. Celine, I promise you, I will only accompany Ori 99 times every time I go. I'll buy a gold bean for you when I've gone 99 times. Bring the bottle to me. I will definitely come back home with you. From that day on, the glass bottle became my most cherished possession. But now the gold beans inside were gone. Robert stared blankly at the glass bottle, as if his heart had also become empty. He looked up and saw a piece of paper on the table in the living room. Robert's eyes brightened, and he quickly ran over to grab the paper, his gaze falling on the familiar, elegant handwriting. Letter. Robert, I'm leaving. I submitted the divorce application 10 days ago. I'm sorry to only inform you now. Originally, I wanted to say goodbye properly the day I left, but I overestimated myself. I won't make it until then. Chapter 8. Writing this letter is my way of asking you, in light of our past as a married couple, to do one thing for me. The soup bowl that was broken last night belongs to Ollie. I cleaned up the pieces and put them in the cupboard along with a stack of money. Please pass it on to Ollie and thank her for always taking care of me. Although I didn't get to drink the soup, I will always remember the gesture. Robert, I blame you. I blame you for abandoning me again and again for Orianna. I blame you for making me lose our child. And I blame you even more for marrying me in the first place. Our lives have intersected in so many ways, but in the end we must return to where we started. I'm letting you and Orianna be together, and I ask you to let me go. Don't come looking for me. Don't appear in my life. I never want to see you again. Shaking. Robert sat for a long time after reading the letter. He thought he would always wait for her. He thought she couldn't live without him. But where in this world does anyone truly need someone else so badly that they cannot leave? The next day, Robert received a call from the police station because Orianna had refused to apologize. She caused a scene at the hospital and was taken to the police station. When he arrived at the station, Robert's mood was surprisingly calm. Ever since he saw my letter the previous day, he had been reflecting. He thought about everything involving Orianna and me. The more he thought, the more uneasy he felt. The more he thought, the more disgusted he became with Orianna. But as soon as he remembered that Orianna was a patient, he couldn't help but suppress his disgust, which made him feel even worse. He still wanted to find me. He wanted to be with me, to atone for his sins. But I had already told him I never wanted to see him again. He had thought that when Orianna tried to kill herself, he felt heartbroken. But now he knew what truly pained him was my departure. But it was too late. The police chief was an old classmate of Robert's. Upon hearing his request, the officer quickly explained what had happened. Although the hospital had called the police, since the nurse wasn't severely injured, they had planned to mediate the situation. They thought it would be enough to have Orianna apologize. But for some reason, Orianna refused to back down, causing a major disruption at the hospital. That's why she had been detained overnight. Robert rubbed his forehead and tried to push down his discomfort, thanking his old friend. After picking up Orianna, Robert drove her back home, perhaps due to being held overnight. Orianna's mental state wasn't good. As soon as they arrived, she clung to Robert's sleeve, unwilling to let go. "Robert, don't leave me. Stay with me." Orianna's eyes were filled with tears, and her voice was pitiful. Robert sighed deeply. "Ori, go back to Sea City. Let's not contact each other anymore." Both Robert and Orianna were from Sea City. After falling ill, Orianna had come to a city to be near Robert. In the past, Robert couldn't bear to leave her, but now he no longer wanted to see her. The moment he looked at her, he was reminded of the child that was never born. Orianna's face changed. Her nails dug into Robert's arm. "Now you're going to abandon me too, aren't you?" Robert jumped back in surprise at the sudden pain, instinctively pulling his hand away. "Orianna, are you crazy?" But the next second, his eyes locked onto her face. Orianna stood there, her hair disheveled, her pale face twisted with a malevolent look in her eyes. "You finally realize it," she said, her voice filled with an eerie smile. "Robert, my family doesn't want me anymore. You're all I have left. You're not leaving me." Robert took 2 steps back, feeling an icy chill running down his spine. "What are you talking about? You came here to heal from depression, right?" Orianna laughed lightly, her voice sickly sweet. "I'm healing, but I'm not depressed. I'm insane. My parents were afraid of me. They wanted me gone. Robert, you're the only one left for me." While speaking, she reached out to grab Robert. A cold shiver spread from his feet to his head. He cursed under his breath and shoved the door open to leave. But the next day, Orianna was sitting innocently in front of Robert's door again. After that, Robert tried countless ways to get rid of Orianna, but she was mentally ill and had no shame. Whenever she couldn't find Robert, she would make a scene at the police station. She even attempted suicide multiple times. Helpless, Robert had no choice but to repeatedly be called by the police. Again and again, he became the center of attention. From then on, Robert could never escape Orianna. As for me, after leaving, I went to the UK through hard work. I was accepted into a design school and began to rebuild my life. Robert tried to contact me, but I never responded. It was only after leaving him that I realized how much more there was to life. He was a part of my past, but I still had so many possibilities ahead of me.